What's going on, everyone? So today is the day where we get to look back at some of the cards that we rated early on, specifically legendaries, on a tier list to talk about which ones I got completely wrong. I decided to do this video a little bit earlier. Normally I talk about some of the mistakes I made regarding cards, and then also I do a video on the mistakes I got or I have regarding leaders, because honestly I think there may actually be some suspensions in this set. So I've got to go quickly for some of these videos because who knows, we might have two separate metas to talk about based on the suspensions if they do happen. Cad Bane. Maybe previous. Maybe Chimera. All right. Well, let's dive into some of the cards today, talk about which ones actually have been performing well. It's kind of going to be an interesting list because there's going to be some really straightforward, okay, sure. And then there's going to be some cards that are lesser known and not as talked about that are sneaking under the radar or may actually do a lot better after if there are some suspensions. A huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for supporting the channel, and a special shout out to Hawks Nest Gaming. Thank you so much for making more videos possible. And let's dive right in. And starting off in reverse order, starting with Cunning. Alrighty, well, starting off with Cunning, I'm also going to include Eye of Scion in there. Eye of Scion, we'll start off with, yeah, this was just straight up a C tier, maybe even arguably a D tier so far. And this really was, as I had mentioned in my video previously, which is feeling more like a Twin Suns card. I basically just put anything in Twin Suns that makes it like a fun, memeable, maybe something that could do something cool as a Twin Suns card. Not necessarily that they're like excellent in Twin Suns, but a lot of the times in Twin Suns, depending on your pod, you could have games that go a lot longer. You may have a more aggressive pod. You may have a situation where you can't play it in that format as well, which is why, you know, maybe it goes in C tier because it does have a powerful effect of being able to go ahead and search the top 8 cards of your deck for a, that costs the same as or less than this power, so 5 or less, and you can play it for free and enters play ready. I mean, that's a powerful effect. It's just playing a 7-drop that kind of does nothing until you activate it. And even if you do, you get a 5-drop worth of resources, and then you have to activate it again to make it to do anything. Just ends up being very weak. So yeah, sort of just a straight C tier, really not doing anything whatsoever in Premiere pretty much ever. But it does have a powerful effect, which is why I couldn't put it in D tier, but you could argue for the D tier. Next up, we got Improvised Identity. This one's been kind of interesting. We actually have seen a armor deck with Improvised Identity pop off and take down a tournament. For those of you that don't know what Improvised Identity does, it's a 2-cost ground upgrade in Cunning, +0, +3. You can attach it to a ground unit, and then we have this action to search the top 3 cards of our deck for a ground unit, discard it, then you can actually attack with that unit, and it's going to get the abilities of that unit. I played a lot with Improvised Identity. I think it's a very fun card. It is probably the most interesting card of the set for me. Probably the most interesting set or card of the set. And it's really straightforward as to why. I just think it's kind of a fun combo potential. It's not just strictly good, which obviously takes away some of the fun effectiveness of a card in general. You've got some really interesting combos. The most fun pull off that I've had with this is like Maul, and I've had situations where you could just like pull Maul off of your leader, or maybe a unit that's an upgrade with Darksaber, and you attack their base. You get to steal their unit forever because it's really tough to kill off like a +0, +3 up armor, right? That turns into a 4/9. That's really hard to actually kill off, and then you could apply more and more upgrades. It really has a nice combo with one of the other legendaries on this list, actually, Arcana Starmap, which maybe we'll talk a little bit more about. So, the rating, usually I reserve C tier for maybe some like niche picks that has some power, but it really is very specific. I think I would still keep it in the C tier. It's not just a card that you're generally going to slam into any deck. And that's not to say that Armor has actually like performed amazingly or anything like that. It has just been like one teeny tiny PQ that actually did some work for it in a fun deck, right? It by no means has performed excellently or anything with Improvised Identity. You could argue that it might be more of like a B tier option, but C tier is usually reserved for those niche, potentially powerful picks, but extremely inconsistent. And I think that perfectly describes what the Improvised Identity does. Very inconsistent. but maybe has those really, really cool moments. Next up in C tier, or in Cunning rather, not, I guess that's Cunning tier, huh? We got Elzar. Now this one, 6-drop, Cunning, ground unit, 3/7. While you control a force leader, this unit enters play ready. And when you play it, you distribute a bunch of advantage tokens, 5 to be exact, among friendly other units. And then an opponent searches twice that many cards for the top of their list for an event. They get to reveal it and then draw it. Now, when I was talking about this, I mentioned that like it's basically like kill your own deck or like hit your own deck because of the searching for an event. And that still is a very, very big downside. Although there never really felt like there was a good home for this. And the one deck that actually ended up really making Elzar pop was Vader Yellow. And this makes a lot of sense. And I hadn't thought about it at the time, but he is a pilot leader, so he's never deployed on the ground arena. So I was never thinking like, oh yeah, that's our force leader that we need. But it is the perfect leader for this because Vader creates so many different TIE Fighter tokens that you're actually going to be able to utilize those advantage tokens to where you basically have 8 immediately readied up damage. And that's pretty strong. There really isn't anything else to talk about with Elzar. There isn't a single other deck that truly has made Elzar pop, with the exception of Vader Yellow. And it's not like Vader Yellow is making Elzar like a must-have. There are a lot of decks that still do not like Elzar, or a lot of Vader Yellow players that are adapting Elzar that still haven't really fully committed. It's more of a sideboard option against certain lists. So I think it bumps itself up into the B tier category. Definitely. You could also argue that it's more of a niche pick. I do think the power level in of itself was relatively strong, and the downside wasn't as impactful as I thought it would be in this version of the meta. One of the things that I was worried about is like, okay, if there's a lot of aggressive negotiations deck, you're just drawing them into aggressive negotiations, you're probably just dying. So that's not something that's really happening all that much. So I think it does get just generically more powerful because of the state of the meta. Next up, we've got Caloran back. Nice little 4-cost ambusher, 3/5. In Cutting Heroism, it gets +1/+0 for each other unit with 0 power. This one, not super strong. In fact, I put it around the B tier category as I was evaluating it last time, and it's not been like horrible. It's never been like, oh man, I'm playing Caloran back. It's something that I really wish I didn't have in my deck. There are some situations where it does the ambush thing, and then some situations where it's kind of just like a 3/5. I've seen it be played in the Grogu lists. The only exception to this is Grief Karga. So Grief Karga makes this a 4/5 ambusher, which is a lot more powerful. But it's never been like, oh yes, I'm playing Caloran back. It has been the best card in my deck. It is definitely like a solid B tier option. Grief Karga Red has been a little bit of a disappointment compared to what I was hoping it would be and what my initial, kind of experience was after Cad Bane and a lot of other decks just started completely dominating the format. Grief definitely fell off in terms of viability, as with basically every other deck. So, Caloran Beck fell a little bit for me, and I actually think Elzar is probably just a better card in the state of things than Caloran Beck has, which is definitely not what I had on my list before. So not terrible, but nothing stronger than like a low level B card, to be honest, for legendary tiers. We've got the last cutting card, which is Gorian Shard's Corsair. This one, 6-drop capital ship. It's a cunning villainy card. 6/5. Damage dealt by a friendly underworld cards is unpreventable, and when you play it or attack with it, you just deal 2 damage to a unit. I thought this could be fun and something that could be minorly powerful in maybe like a Piet Yellow deck. Piet Yellow is just like nowhere to be seen. It's just not very powerful, and that has just been really outclassed by other versions of Piet Blue, or Piet Red. Pretty much since the existence of Piet, with maybe the exception of when Triple Dark Grade was in the format, which, didn't really last long for Piet, I will admit. So Gorian Shard's Corsair really just hasn't fit anywhere. It doesn't really fit in like Cad Bane Yellow even, which is another version of the deck that can maybe utilize it. I have seen it. The effectiveness isn't that strong. A lot of the times you'd rather just play your other 6-drops on that portion of the curve, or just go with a completely different strategy entirely, like Son of Frosty, for example, when you're playing that list. So I'm going to put it in C tier, honestly. Just something that's not particularly strong. And you know what? We gotta put Ion Sign in D tier. It just unlike these two, like I can't put Ion Sign next to Improvised Identity when Improvised Identity actually did something in armor. I'm sorry, Ion Sign, you gotta go with D tier. Let's be honest here. That's gonna be the Cunning stack up. Let's go ahead and move on to Aggression though. Okay, starting off with the Whistling Birds here. This is a 3-cost upgrade, +2/+2 in Aggression. When we hit a unit into the base, if they dealt combat damage to a base, you get to do 2 damage to each unit that opponent controls in whatever arena the Whistling Birds is in. So maybe you could attach it to a Minoc, right? Because it's a non-vehicle unit that you have to attach it to. It's an upgrade. I honestly thought this was going to be very good, and it turns out it's not very good. It occasionally will do some things. I have seen it pop up like as a sideboard option, or maybe as an upgrade in like the armor decks if you happen to be going that aggression route. It's overall just an upgrade that basically has the same problem with every other upgrade. And even in this case, more so because there's a lot of sentinels, it's actually difficult to hit into base to actually get the effect. Like you can't just ignore your opponent's units. They don't really want to attack your upgrade unit because you're just going to lose their units. And then you hit base. Well, can't do that because they have sentinels. And also, your opponents have shielded units, which make cards like Whistling Birds a lot weaker. Because if they're a shielded card, then they can just hit into your upgraded unit and eventually kill it, which is a little bit weaker as well. You can't just hit into their base and kill like their 3/2s or whatever. Like when they have Leppy Lookout, they are guaranteed to get an attack into you if you haven't hit it already. So, Whistling Birds, just a mediocre upgrade, as with a lot of other upgrades in the format in general. We've got Boba Fett's Rancor up next. I think this one's actually been quite interesting. I thought this guy was going to be basically unplayable with the exception of very, very, very niche spots in the meta where maybe you could filter him in as kind of like a win con in controlling decks if you're really, really able to not feel the pressure of extra 5 damage to your base. And I suppose that's exactly where we see him. Definitely more of that niche pick, really not even a full 3 of, but Lando Blue has played him. Lando Blue in the splash, which has been kind of funny. Comes down on 10 resources, deals 5 damage to something, 5 damage to his own base, and, attacks and gets in a lot of damage, right? When you're running Colossus or even 30 HP in Lando, you have that room because you do have those early plays. I've played a lot of Lando at this point that, well, and we'll talk about them later, but they're just better win cons. And not only that, but the 5 damage to base is a very, very relevant cost. It is a very, very relevant cost when you play him. Yes, you could go ahead and deal 5 damage to a unit and another 5 damage, which gets past shields, which is really, really important. So I do like that component of the Boba Fett's Rancor. And it can hit leaders, but 10 cost, I mean, that stacks up very similarly to some other cards on this. It's more of just like okay, in these very, very few situations, you can run this as like a 1 or 2 of, and it can do certain things in certain matchups. And that's more of like a C tier value pick, in my opinion. So C tier for that one. Zeb here. I wasn't super high on Zeb, so I really just kind of felt like he was going to be maybe a pick you could make in some of the more aggressive decks on the top end. And honestly, he just hasn't done anything. Like, yes, some of the Grief decks out there are playing him, some of them, but it hasn't been, okay, I'm playing Grief Red or Ezra Red, and I'm playing Zeb, which obviously is really the only home for Zeb. So if those decks are not necessarily playing it, where are we fitting Zeb? Nowhere. And even in the decks that are playing Zeb, his win percentage is like extremely low. So I actually think he was even lower than I was potentially rating him, and maybe like a C tier option. Very, very, very niche spots. I've seen it come in from the sideboard and do a little bit extra. It's kind of cool to see all those advantage tokens be defeated. Obviously, when you get to play him and put advantage tokens on something else and then attack with them, you essentially get +6 damage from Zeb, because you get 3 damage to another unit, or 3 advantage tokens to another unit, and then those things are defeated when you attack, which deals 1 damage to a base, which is cool, but not strong. 7 cost is very, very expensive. You're not going to have many units to put things on at that point in this meta, and yeah, you're better off just doing something else. Grogu, on the other hand, I actually have liked. So I actually thought Grogu was going to be really, really good. I do think, as with everything, and we mentioned this before, heroism, aggression has really, really suffered, but he's also just not been played a whole lot. Even though I do think he's really cool, his performance has been really, really atrocious. And I think he actually has to go down by Zeb. Very, very similar situation in which the decks that are looking to play this strategy may actually want Grogu alongside Zeb in more aggressive strategies. But it's also just a 2-powered unit on turn 2. And the initiative turns out isn't as important as in other sets. Like in other metas, you may be in this situation where sequencing your turn and making sure you get the initiative might be more important. In this set, it still is important, but not as. And therefore, Grogu's value has dropped off quite a bit because you're not really caring about taking the initiative, really. And that hinders how valuable Grogu is. This one, to me, was a pretty big miss in my book. Just, I had him rated a lot higher, and his effectiveness has been bad. It has been bad, let's just be honest. Moving on, though, we got Ninth Sister, and yeah, this one, I just got to put it in A tier still. I had it in A tier last time, and maybe we'll do a full breakdown of the list that I had previously, like I mentioned. And you know what? It's just good. It's just good. We see this in Cad Bane. We've seen this in Boba Fett. We've seen this in basically any aggression villainy deck. Heck, even decks that are not necessarily aggression villainy, I've seen people try to splash this card. Daedra is a great example of just kind of the best home for this, I think, even more so than, let's say, Cad Bane or Boba Fett was. But it has kind of like a 3-for-1 value engine built into it. You play this, you make them discard a card, you get the force throw kind of thing where you get to deal some damage to stuff, and then they have to deal with Night Sister in of itself. So it's kind of like a 2.5 or 3-for-1 effect. And in a format where the games are going a little bit longer and they do have this more grindy potential with Cad Banes as your opponent, I actually do think this is a card that's pretty decent against Cad Bane in that late game option where you are trading with some big heavy hitters, and Ninth Sister does a decent job of that. It's definitely something that people have to be considering when you get to this point of the curve, like keeping a cheap card in hand. Do I want to do that for Ninth Sister? Or if I do that, am I just losing the game because I don't have enough power in my hand? You have to make those considerations. You have to make those lines correctly to go ahead and win those games where you otherwise wouldn't. But Ninth Sister, just overall value card, nice little A tier piece, I think. So no swaps on this one. Happy to see this one do its job. And then that moves us into Command. Alrighty, starting off in Command here, we've got the Darksaber. Now, I actually thought this was going to be a solid upgrade. It giving you the leader component of this. It's really, really awesome to dodge a lot of removal effects. I don't necessarily think maybe it's like a low A tier, but it's definitely around like the high B tier, low A tier range in terms of effectiveness in the meta. There's a lot of decks that actually play with this, and its overall like effectiveness in the meta, it hasn't had like an amazing win rate, which makes me why I'm actually gonna put in high B tier. It really just hasn't performed like incredibly, but it's performed even better than I thought it was initially, because I thought it was just gonna be a solid upgrade. It turns out +4/+2 is a lot of power, which we knew from other Darksaber days, but the fact that you get the leader unit or make that unit into a leader unit means that some decks are just gonna really, really struggle. And a lot of decks are playing certain cards to deal with this now. So like Retaliation is one that I've seen people play. You're playing more Condemns, even though there's more upgrade hate out there. There's a lot of like weird cards that people are playing to go ahead and deal with this. And I think the biggest thing that actually makes it, preventing it from going into the A tier component, is Cad Bane. Cad Bane just, deals damage. So they don't actually care about it being a leader unit. They've got so many different ways to remove it off the board with just straight damage effects, right? Like Ping plus Cyborg Mech, or Tie Dagger Vanguard plus a bunch of units on the board, or big Sentinels that are blocking your path. And those things obviously do well against the Darksaber. So it dodges conventional removal, but doesn't dodge damage. And that definitely prevents it from being in the A tier. We got Luke next up. This one, I thought it was going to be much better than he truly is. I think he ends up playing as like a mid of the pack to low B tier option. Really, there's not a whole lot of decks that can support this, as the best thing about Luke is, well, you maybe are in a situation where you can wipe someone's like mass space board against Vader yellow if you have a couple of units on the board. The problem with that is you need to have a lot of units on the board to do so. So it can actually work. But then the other thing you have to consider is, what deck do I have to play this in a command heroism list? Okay, what are the best command heroism list? You know, we've got like Ahsoka, we've got Luke's. These decks don't really want Luke. Luke, pilot Luke leader, by the way. That is just going to be deploying a couple units a turn. You probably don't even have 3 other units when Luke comes down to get the effect. And in Ahsoka, you don't want to be playing a 6-drop on Ahsoka flip turn. You want to be playing your plot cards and when one-shotting your opponent. So it just doesn't really have a home, and I think that's what's hindering it the most. It's still's got a powerful effect, and in certain matchups it is very strong, but there's just not a lot of decks that can really well support it in their game plan. So yeah, weaker than I was hoping for. Admiral Akbar. Honestly, this right here might be the biggest miss of the format for me in terms of what I thought Admiral Akbar was capable of. He has actually performed exceptionally well comparatively. I had him pretty low on the list. I think it was C tier. Like I said, I'll pull up the list at the end of this so we can see and reflect upon all these ratings. But Admiral Akbar just does work. You know, you play it in a space deck, you're going to be able to get a bunch of space units off of it. It's an instant board generator. Obviously, the best case scenario is you play this and you get like 3 units out of it, 2 1-drops and a 3-drop, or 2 2-drops and a 1-drop, and it's very, very likely for that to happen. I've seen it. Best home probably is like the Han pilot deck, where you can play this, you get a bunch of odd cost units, you can then play Han and then play another Admiral Akbar and get more units. Like, that is totally a situation that's happened multiple times for me, which is really, really fun. But truly the best performing home for this has been in Luke. Luke just plays this as a card that, okay, maybe I just lost all my space units because you've been killing all my units all game. Cool, I play Admiral Akbar, I get 2 units off the top. I can guarantee my Luke flip turn, which is very, very important in that deck. So actually has a positive win rate and performs better, even if it's in command heroism, which has been surprising. So very, very cool stuff. We got Ravager next up. This one I was really high hopes for as well, but didn't do as well as I had hoped. Probably like a middle of the pack, a B tier card, maybe even going down towards the Luke tier. But it has some spots where it's good. It does kill off some very, very strong cards in the format, and it does have homes like in Krennic Blue, for example, and Piet. Yes, people are playing the Ravager, but it's not nearly as strong as I was hoping for. Even in a situation where it's a 9-drop ship that comes down and kills a space unit, the fact that it's not versatile and actually interacts with the ground arena as well means that it's kind of a brick in your deck a lot of the times. You play this, you have no targets, then you have to play a ground unit for it to really truly shine. And honestly, if you're on 10 resources and you're able to play a ground unit with this living, you're probably winning the game anyways. So there are situations where it's good for sure. Like in that Krennic Blue scenario, I do like the Ravager up against those big pilot decks. If they put like Luke pilot onto a red 5 or whatnot, you can get some effectiveness out of that. So there is some value there. 8-10 coming in and dealing damage equal to its power. And that's just a strong effect, right? And technically it makes every unit afterwards deal damage equal to its power to something in the same arena. So, nothing too bad there. And heck, even if they do deploy Luke on like a red 5, for example, I guess +4/+5, which means it's 9 toughness, and Ravager doesn't immediately kill it. So even in situations like that, Ravager doesn't even come in and kill off your opponent's big space unit that you thought that you would be able to deal with Ravager. So yeah, just overall kind of mediocre. Nothing too strong coming in from Ravager, even though I thought it was going to be, really, really quite strong. And the decks that are playing it are just performing well. With Ravager, it's a small boon. And then Gallius Rax is the last command card. This one, I thought it was just going to be kind of solid in certain lists. We saw an immediate, Sloan Blue perform decently. This thing is basically not Saw play at all. I've gotta put it like down here in the C tier. I had it higher because I had hopes, I suppose, for the Sloan decks. Really, that's what I saw its vision being. But then I also had like, okay, we got Imperial Armored Commando in the format. We've got maybe some value with Moff Gideon. Yeah, those are just all cards that you don't really want to be pairing Gallius Rax with. In fact, Command Villainy is not something that has really done a whole lot, with the exception of Krennic. Krennic is really the one deck. You could say like the new Thrawn Green, I suppose, has done some work, but this whole strategy of trying to create a bunch of units and having them have keywords and then playing Gallius Rex, yeah, that's just too much work. And so the only deck that it really fits in is Sloan, and Sloan isn't where you really want to be right now. The whole concept of Sloan just gets completely annihilated by the best deck in the format. So yeah, Gallius Rex, even though nice, fun card, 6-drop, 4/7 comes in, gives all the friendly units with 2 more keywords, +2/+2, can give you a lot of power, but it just doesn't fit in the meta right now. Now we get to move on to the exciting part of the list in Vigilance. These are some powerhouses and some major bricks. Just start off with Arcana Star Map here. Honestly, this is like a pairing with the Improvised Identity right here. I don't think it's nearly as powerful. I think it ends up more on the lower end of C tier. Improvised Identity is like the combo piece. It is the reason why the Armorer deck can kind of exist in that form. And Arcana Star Map allows you to just kind of like double up the effectiveness, and it does increase its value quite a bit. It goes from like Improvised Identity being like maybe like a 50 to 60% hit chance to maybe like a 70 to 80% hit chance in a lot of circumstances, depending on how your deck is built. So I think that is interesting. It really only has its place there. It is an unique upgrade, which means that you can't just slam 3 copies and just play it as a +0/+3 in a lot of decks, because you have to just resource the other ones that are caring about an upgrade. There's not really any home for upgrade decks, with the exception of Armorer, and then you have this Improvised Identity, which makes this exciting. So yeah, it's just like it's just a weak card, and really only finds its home in Improvised Identity. But in that spot, it does do some work. So I'm not going to put it in the D tier. Suma Verminoth. I put this in D tier last time. I'm going to upgrade it. I know, that's crazy, right? We're putting it at the bottom of C tier. And here's the reason why, okay? Here's the reason why. Improvised Identity. Just the same thing. It's got an auto-attack trigger defeating all other space units. In theory, you could play your Improvised Identity, you can attack, and you can just defeat an entire space deck. It actually gives you some game against that version of the deck, or versions of decks. There's a lot of Luke, there's a lot of Boba, there's a lot of Vader Yellows out there. This actually gives you a win con against them. Things like Maul or Nihilus or any other card that you might be playing like that doesn't actually do enough in those spots. Suma Romanoff does, and it actually wins you the game. Initially, I wasn't super high on it because a lot of the things in Karabast, you weren't playing against a bunch of space decks at that point. And then, of course, people started playing and prepping for tournaments, and that's where Suma Verminoth actually had a home. So someone out there, I think, mentioned, I can't remember if it was a patron or a commenter out there, but they had actually shouted this out to me when I played my Armorer deck. And I just wanted to say, yeah, you were right. Well done. Well done. Not that it was like a particularly strong combo, right? Like Improvised Identity is not, but it does have a home. And before, I just did not see the home for it. And Improvised Identity gave it a home. So we're going to upgrade it into C tier. Very, very bottom, but it's a C tier card. And now we get to the big hitters, okay? We got to start off with the Mandalorian. Okay, Mandalorian, I actually think it's just an S tier card, right? I've seen this card quite a bit at this point. Really, the deck that's really looking to utilize this truly is the Ahsoka decks. But really, any heroism vigilance deck that can really well support units, Mandalorian's actually quite strong in. I am a little hesitant to put it in S tier just because... Spoiler alert. I think these cards... Okay, you know what? I can't do it. I'm going to put it in A tier because I do think these cards are just like a level up. Okay. Mandalorian, still very good. A nice little 5/4 shielded that can prevent damage. Essentially, use that shield token for another unit that was dealt damage. Can be super obnoxious. If you've got like an Obi-Wan or a Captain Typho or like some random Sentinel, this just doubles up that Sentinel. It's a 4 resource 5/4. It just hits and is kind of annoying to deal with. And I really like it in the Ahsoka deck, which happens to be a very strong deck, because you play a unit that basically preemptively protects your other units from coming down, and that's all Ahsoka wants to do, right? deploy their units and just immediately get a big support swing. And this has got 5 power, which means it is very, very likely to power up Ahsoka as well. So really just overall powerful card. Nothing too crazy about this one. Not like some insane value or anything, but just kind of everything you're looking to do in the deck that's really strong right now in Heroism, Vigilance, which is Ahsoka. So gotta shout out the Mandalorian. And then we got Pre-Vizsla, Chimera. I'm actually gonna slap these right immediately in S tier. Immediately in S tier, I think no one is surprised. Now, I had Chimera higher than Pre-Vizsla. I think I had Pre-Vizsla actually in like the very, very top of A tier because I just thought Chimera was just like that step above. Now, I do think it's interesting because if you actually look at the stats, these things are very, very close. Chimera has slightly higher deck count played or card count played. And then Pre-Vizsla has more decks that it's played in. And then if you look at total copies across main and side, Pre-Vizsla's actually played more. And if you look at total copies main and side, Chimera's played more main deckable. So Pre-Vizsla slightly more sideboarded and comes in. And then Chimera's just generally a little bit stronger. It looks like main deckable. So I think Chimera ends up being, if you're going to slice hairs, just slightly better than Pre-Vizsla. But they're so close. I had a whole tier difference between these two, so that was definitely a miss. Even though I thought they were both going to be like the best legendaries of the format. They're even better than I thought. I mean, they're being played in out of aspect decks across the board. It's not just Mandalorian. It's not just Lando. It's just like every single place you see these, they are there. And it's one of the reasons these are actually, well, these two are part of the reason why I'm making this list right now, or making this video right now, is I actually think there's a potential for one of these to potentially get suspended or restricted, which is a crazy conversation just a couple weeks after set release. And I know I've mentioned this before as well. We've had technically the set kind of released for quite some time because of the early spoilers from Galactic Championship and how they've released basically the full set way earlier than intended. But still, I mean, the effectiveness of these has been far and above exceeded whatever I had expected. If there was like another tier like S+, I could see an argument for putting these two up there and then having a full tier where nothing is in and then having the rest of these cards. That's how strong these has been. So very, very powerful and absolute dominant. So other than that, guys, let me just go ahead and pull up the previous list. You guys can kind of compare the two side by side. All right, so really quickly, just a comparison here. I had to pull up my old set 8 legendary tier list video. This is where I had everything placed. I think really the biggest shout outs truly are Ravager and Luke and Grogu in A tier. Ravager closest, Luke second closest. Grogu was, I think, the biggest miss of that portion. And then we have a couple things in C tier that are just way better than they realistically should have been down here. Admiral Akbar, by far the biggest miss on this list, in my opinion. Maybe competing with Grogu. So maybe these two are the biggest misses. Elzar also doing much better than expected. But for the most part, what the meta-defining cards were on the nose. I mean, Chimera, Pre-Vizsla, Night Sister really, truly are the meta-defining cards. Mandalorian's up there as well. The rest of them have kind of just fallen in their place. You know, you might even argue that the biggest miss was Suma Verminoff. You know, it's not D tier. Let's go. But I do think the Akbar and Elzar were the two kind of really, really off cards on this whole list. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below, guys. What the meta has shaped up to be. Have you enjoyed it? Is this a fun time? And were you expecting it? Seems like clearly by the time I did that list, which was almost like a month and a half, 2 months ago at this point, I was. With the Chimera and Pre-Vizsla. I think the biggest surprise, like I said, how strong Ahsoka was and how Mandalorian fit in that deck. And then the Pilot's decks, just truly, truly wanting Admiral Akbar just as a value card. I was wondering if that was going to be the case, and it looks like it had been. And it's better than I thought because it fits in multiple decks and it's just a powerhouse in of itself. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.